Correct.
You don't have a brand that people recognize.
Absolutely.
But maybe there's a shortcut to actually having brand recognition using a little something called Parody Law.
Hello there, everybody. I'm Joseph Regari from Fox and Mogul, and I'm here to talk to you today about a part of copyright and trademark law that is near and dear to our hearts here on the internet: fair use and trademark parody doctrine. Anyone who's ever made a video on YouTube has seen or heard about fair use doctrine, and anyone who has ever seen the show Nathan For You is probably at least a little familiar with the concept of parody law. You'll often see under some videos some variation of this language, all rights attributed to their respective creators. This video is an educational commentary, transformative use under 17 U.S.C. 107 fair use. Now obviously just saying that you're doing something doesn't make it true, but it does raise a pretty important point. How does fair use doctrine really work? And what is a parody within the meaning of the law? Today, we're going to take a look at some fairly popular and well-known examples of parody law in action, including Nathan For You's Dumb Starbucks, which not only lets us touch on copyright fair use, but trademark parody law as well. So come along as we delve into fair use and parody and what you need to know. Now obviously, we don't own the copyright to the Nathan For You sketch, Dumb Starbucks, nor do we own any license to the work. So how is it that we and so many others can get away with using the works owned by someone else? Likely, at least in part, by a big entity like Comedy Central. The answer is simple. Fair use doctrine permits it. But why is that? It all has to do with something we mentioned earlier, Title 17 of the United States Code. That title deals pretty exclusively with copyright law in the United States, and Section 107 is where we find the building blocks of fair use law. Now the text of Section 107 is a bit wordy and definitely in legalese, but for you all to see in all of its glory, notwithstanding the provisions of 106 and 106A, the fair use of a copyrighted work, including such use and reproduction of copies or phonorecords or by any other means specified by that section for such purposes as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, including multiple copies for classroom use, scholarship, or research, is not an infringement of copyright. In determining whether the use made of a work in any particular case is fair use, the factors to be considered shall include: 1. The purpose and character of the use, including whether such use is of a commercial nature or is for non-profit educational purposes. 2. The nature of the copyrighted work. 3. The amount and substantiality of the portion used in relation to the copyrighted work as a whole. And 4. The effect of the use upon the potential market for or value of the copyrighted work. The fact that a work is unpublished shall not itself bar a finding of fair use if such finding is made upon consideration of all the above factors. Whew, that is a mouthful. But what does it mean? Here, we'll break it down, factor by factor, with quick explanation of each. And then, we can get into Nathan For You. The first part, where it talks about notwithstanding Section 106, is in reference to the rights provided under copyright. You know, other people can't publish or reproduce or sell your work. But it includes the key phrase, the fair use of the copyrighted work, including such use by comment, among other things, sets up the sorts of use that would be fair use. But the law analyzes it on a case-by-case basis, taking into account, along with other considerations, the four main issues. First, we look at the purpose and character of the work. What we're mainly asking here is, how is it being used? Is the fair user trying to make money? Are they not making money? Are they just trying to educate? The less financial or commercial benefit you get from the use, the more this factor makes it look like a fair use. But remember, there are 3 other factors to look at, including 2. The nature of the copyrighted work. Now, isn't that vague? No worries, lots of lawyers have spent a ton of time figuring out exactly what they mean by this. And it's simpler than you think. The United States Copyright Office has released a fair use index to help shed some light. What it says is essentially this: it's all about whether the work is more creative or more factual. Also, whether or not the work was published matters. Yes, you can have copyright over unpublished work. Remember, it's just creativity and writing the thing down, not whether you gave it to others. But at the end of the day, it's all about fact versus creative. It's as simple as that. Using a storybook or a song is going to be a bit harder than, say, a news report or the United States Copyright Office Fair Use Index. But again, we've got 2 more parts, then I promise we'll get to Nathan For You. The next consideration is this: 3. The substantiality and the amount of the copyrighted work you're using. This one's pretty simple. If you use a large chunk of the work, for example, all those reaction channels everyone used to talk about, or if you use a small amount, but it's the most important part or the heart of the work, then you might have some difficulty with fair use versus the opposite. Now, as to determining what the heart of a work is, it's not that easy to nail down. But just imagine this. What is it about that movie or that song or that play that really makes it unique? And again, this is just one of the 4 factors. The last of which is 4. The effect of the use on the market for that copyrighted work. Those reaction channels are again a good example of this issue in action. Think of it like this. If you watch the work that someone else published or performed, how much would it affect whether you go and see or purchase the work from its actual creator? The more it affects the market, the less likely it is to be fair use. And that's the main 4 factors. No one factor will be determinative, and sometimes one can seriously impact the others. But the gist is this. Fair use means that when you're using the work, you're doing your best not to hurt the ability of the copyright owner to utilize their work to make money, or build their reputation, or sponsor what they want to sponsor rather than what you want to use. With that in mind, let's move on to part 2, Nathan, for you.
Oh, dumb Starbucks. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Oh, you thought it was Starbucks.
I did.
Store has to be categorized as an art gallery, so we don't have to abide by the same health regulations. We don't want any of our customers to get sick, but if they do, technically that's part of the artistic experience.
Okay.
Not bad, huh? Not too much of the episode. This can't really be said to be all there is to it, so it's not really the heart. We're trying to educate you about the law related to it, and nobody is going here instead of Comedy Central to see the show. I'd say we're not too shabby on fair use. That brings us to our real point for talking about it, the trademark parody law. So why oh why does Nathan think he can just ape the Starbucks logo and get away with it? As you can see, he's relying pretty heavily on the parody law doctrine. It looks like Starbucks, but it isn't. It's dumb Starbucks. But how does parody law work? And how protected is he really? Today, we'll hone in on 3 main considerations in parody law. What is a parody? What constitutes infringement of a trademark? And how do we make the distinction between Starbucks looking bad and parodying it? I suppose it makes sense to start where we mean to begin. What is a parody? In this case, it's pretty obvious what's meant to be the parody. But is that really good enough? As you can see, Nathan's basic premise is that adding the word dumb to Starbucks changes it enough that it's a commentary on the well-known coffee shop brand. An act that he ultimately backs up by his performative work in the form of the shop being a novelty act of sorts. The heart of a parody is that it makes fun of something. Here, it's Starbucks. The humor of the satire is meant to be, in a way, a commentary on something about the original brand. So what is that commentary? That Starbucks is dumb? Maybe. That Starbucks is so easy to copy in terms of quality that even a dumb Starbucks can succeed? Possibly. But the simple point is this. You've really got to be trying to say something, even if it's silly and mostly pointless, to even touch on parody. Secondly, note the nature of a parody. It's a criticism or commentary, just like fair use. In fact, parody and fair use are often paired together for that exact reason. It's a form of fair use, in a sense, in both trademark and in copyright. So, while we're focusing on trademark fair use here, remember that parody considerations can easily apply to copyright. Think Weird Al covers. Part 2. As you can tell, parody rides a fine line. It's making fun of the brand by mimicking it. This, in turn, raises the issue of whether that line can be crossed. In trademark, you can cross that line in 2 main ways: outright infringement and a doctrine called dilution of the trademark. Simply put, a parody mark needs to be obviously enough of a parody, or else the public will just think it's another part of the original brand. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the heart of trademark infringement: brand confusion. If the people think that dumb Starbucks and Starbucks are part of the same business, it's not looking good for your parody. Secondly, even if it's not exactly the same, dumb Starbucks as opposed to Starbucks, and there isn't specifically confusion in the mind of the consumer as to whether they're part of really the same brand. If dumb Starbucks is still sufficiently similar to Starbucks, it can still cause something called dilution. Trademark dilution comes in 2 flavors: the blurring and the tarnishment flavor. Blurring is where the distinctiveness of the mark is hurt. Think dumb Starbucks to sell shovels. No one is going to think that it hurts Starbucks coffee, but it could reduce the chances that people associate Starbucks specifically with coffee. Now take Nathan for You's example. It's far more likely tarnishment, if it's a dilution at all. Basically, by making dumb Starbucks all but identical to the original Starbucks logo, The argument goes that either selling poor quality coffee or making the original mug look bad, ha ha ha, Starbucks is dumb, might affect brand image and therefore constitute dilution. But obviously, the good folks at Comedy Central would be a little more careful, I'd like to think, than to just dilute the Starbucks mark for a cheap laugh. So what gives? Part 3. An indicator of what makes a parody a parody. So what makes a parody not a dilution, even if the marks are all but the same? It's simple. Think about some of the reasons someone might associate dumb Starbucks with the real Starbucks. Well, the logo's basically the same, so it looks like an issue. Even with a careful marketing strategy, it might not fully prevent the problem of the confusion or the association. Maybe the coffee they sell is just good quality, so it isn't actually hurting the brand. All of these things are true, but there's one factor above all else that elevates this beyond mere dilution: the context. Lots of camera crews, scripted shots, literal episode on television. These are all things that can help to minimize exposure to the dilution issue by making it clear that it's a parody. The more clear the parody, the less likely anyone's going to make the mistake of assuming that it's a Starbucks. In that way, all the stunts and media attention helped by showing that these people were clearly not the same thing as Starbucks. Also helps when you make the news, and the news anchors call your shop a parody shop. But the final help, being well known as a parodist. The moment people realized Dumb Starbucks was just a Nathan For You sketch was the moment it secured parody status. Nobody is going to think a comedian from Comedy Central is doing anything but parody. And there you have it, how our channel can use Nathan For You and how Nathan For You can use Dumb Starbucks. If you ever find yourself needing to know you are in safe, fair use land, feel free to reach out to us at Fox & Mogul, and we're happy to help. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more legal insights. Thanks for sticking through it with me. Bye-bye.